Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that before this prayer ends, you could be standing on the edge of a miracle so great, so overwhelming, that it terrifies you? Imagine an $11 million blessing rushing into your life, not by chance, not by lottery, but through the unseen hand of divine providence. That thought alone shakes the ground beneath your feet, doesn't it? Because deep down you wonder, am I truly ready for that kind of abundance? Am I prepared for God to give me more than I ever asked for? This message is not about numbers, it's about the vastness of divine supply. And if you dare to stay with me until the very end, you'll discover not only why blessings sometimes frighten us, but also how prayer unlocks a flow of abundance so mighty that nothing in your life will remain the same. That is why you must listen closely, because your next breakthrough may be hidden within these very words. The power of belief in prayer is one of the most mysterious and yet one of the most undeniable truths of the human spirit. When a person prays without belief, their words are like echoes in an empty cave, bouncing back to them without life, without force, without transformation. But when a person prays with belief, something shifts not only in the unseen spiritual dimension, but also in the very fabric of their being. Belief gives weight to words. Belief turns spoken sentences into creative power. Belief transforms prayer from a routine recital into a living force that pulls unseen blessings into visible reality. Many approach prayer with hesitation, as though they are unsure whether their voice even reaches beyond the ceiling of their room. They kneel, they whisper, they request, but doubt lingers like a shadow. And yet, the truth is that doubt drains prayer of its strength, while belief magnifies it. Belief does not mean that you see the answer instantly. It means that you are convinced deep within your soul that what you ask for has already been heard, already been prepared, already been set in motion. It is this kind of prayer that frightens people because it carries an unshakable confidence, a certainty that miracles are not far away. They are imminent. Imagine for a moment that you stood at the edge of a vast ocean. You dip a cup into the waves and draw out water. The ocean does not shrink because you have taken from it. In fact, the ocean remains as full and as limitless as it was before. This is what prayer with belief does. It draws from a source that cannot be emptied. Belief tells you that no matter how large your request may seem, no matter how impossible it appears, the reservoir of divine provision is deeper and wider than you could ever measure. When belief fuels prayer, you stop questioning whether you are asking for too much, because you understand that the source of your blessing does not diminish by giving. The reason belief in prayer is so powerful is because it reshapes the inner world before it reshapes the outer world. A person who believes in the effectiveness of their prayer begins to walk differently, speak differently, think differently. They carry themselves not as beggars waiting for scraps, but as heirs waiting for promises. Belief removes the language of desperation and replaces it with the language of assurance. Instead of saying, "I hope this happens," the believer declares, "It is already done." And the moment you begin to live as though the answer is already yours, you activate a flow of energy, opportunity, and alignment that draws the unseen into the seen. Yet, here is the mystery that often shakes people. True belief in prayer often leads to blessings that are overwhelming. When someone prays with unwavering faith, the answer they receive can be so abundant, so sudden, so far beyond expectation, that it terrifies them. It is not uncommon for people to question whether they deserve it, whether they can handle it, or whether it is even real. But this is the very sign of a powerful prayer. When the answer leaves you speechless, when it stretches your imagination, when it pushes you out of your comfort zone, you know that belief has unlocked something greater than you planned for. Belief in prayer is not about convincing God to do something he is reluctant to do. It is about aligning yourself with what has already been set in place for you. The moment your heart believes, the prayer ceases to be a request and becomes a declaration of faith. The universe, the unseen spiritual laws, the very hand of God responds not to hesitation but to conviction. And that conviction is what separates the routine prayer from the prayer that shakes heaven and earth. So when you pray, dare to believe not halfway, not timidly, but fully. Dare to believe that what you ask for is not too big, not too distant, not too impossible. Dare to believe that your words, spoken in faith, carry the power to summon blessings that overflow. Dare to believe that even before the prayer ends, the answer is already in motion. And when you do, prepare yourself, for belief has a way of opening doors so wide and pouring out blessings so heavy that you will not only receive what you asked for, but you will also be transformed by the sheer magnitude of what is given. The metaphysical dimension of prayer is where the unseen becomes more real than what we can touch, hear, or measure. When most people think of prayer, they imagine words spoken into the air, rituals followed out of habit, or requests sent upward like letters waiting for delivery. But prayer in its truest form transcends those outward actions. It is not simply about speaking. It is about aligning the inner spirit with the eternal laws that govern all creation. To understand the metaphysical side of prayer is to realize that what you do in the secret chamber of your soul resonates far beyond the walls of your room. It touches energies, shifts realities, and sets forces into motion that you may not immediately see, but will one day witness with your own eyes. Metaphysics teaches us that reality is not limited to what the senses can detect. What you see with your eyes, hear with your ears, or hold in your hands is but a fraction of existence. The deeper truth lies in the unseen, the realm of spirit, thought, vibration, and divine energy. When you pray, you are not merely speaking into silence. You are tuning into this higher realm, like adjusting a radio to a hidden frequency. The words of your prayer are not as important as the energy behind them, because it is that energy, that belief, that focus, that sends ripples through the invisible field of possibility. Think of prayer as planting a seed in soil you cannot see. At first, there is no visible evidence that anything is happening. The soil is dark, the seed is buried, and to the human eye, there is nothing but emptiness. But beneath the surface, unseen forces are at work. Roots are forming, life is stirring, growth is beginning. In the same way, the metaphysical dimension of prayer teaches us that every prayer sown in faith begins to work beneath the surface of life. The answer may not yet be visible, but that does not mean it is absent. Just as the seed is destined to sprout when nurtured, so too is your prayer destined to bear fruit when charged with unwavering faith. The metaphysical side of prayer also reminds us that words themselves are carriers of power. When spoken with conviction, words create vibration, and vibration creates reality. This is why careless prayer has little effect, but prayer charged with focused intention can move mountains. When you say, "I am healed," in alignment with faith, you are not simply describing a condition. You are calling healing into existence. When you declare, "I am provided for," you are not merely making a statement. You are aligning yourself with the law of abundance that governs the universe. The metaphysical understanding of prayer is that the unseen realm responds to faith, filled words as though they are already true. But here is where many hesitate. Because the unseen does not always reveal itself immediately, doubt creeps in. People pray and then measure their prayers by what they see in front of them, forgetting that what is visible is the last stage of manifestation. First comes belief, then comes energy, then comes alignment, and only then comes the visible result. The metaphysical nature of prayer requires patience and persistence because the unseen is at work long before the seen begins to shift. This is also why the answers to prayer often feel sudden or overwhelming. In truth, they were never sudden. They were forming in the invisible long before they appeared in your visible life. Just as a storm builds over the horizon before the first drop of rain falls, blessings gather in the unseen before breaking forth in your world. To the person without understanding, it looks like coincidence, but to the one who grasps the metaphysical dimension of prayer, it is clear that nothing is coincidence, everything is alignment. When you enter prayer with this awareness, your entire posture changes. You no longer beg for answers as though heaven is reluctant to hear you. Instead, you enter with confidence, knowing you are already connected to the source of life and abundance. You begin to speak not in desperation, but in declaration. You do not ask as if uncertain. You affirm as though it is already done. And this is the essence of metaphysical prayer, to move beyond asking for the possibility of blessing, and instead to align yourself with the certainty of blessing. It is here, in this dimension, that fear begins to fade and faith takes root. Because once you understand that prayer is not limited to what your eyes can see, you begin to trust the process, even in silence. You begin to live with expectation, even in waiting. You begin to realize that the invisible is more powerful than the visible, and that every prayer uttered with true conviction is already working, already moving, already creating. And so, the metaphysical dimension of prayer is not a mystery to be feared, but a truth to be embraced. It teaches you that when you pray, you are not powerless, you are not voiceless, you are not insignificant. You are standing in partnership with the eternal, activating laws that were designed to work in your favor. And when you grasp this, prayer ceases to be ritual. It becomes the most powerful force you will ever wield. Faith, as the currency of heaven, is one of the most profound truths you will ever encounter, because it reveals the very system through which divine blessings flow into human lives. In the world we live in, currency is the means of exchange. You walk into a store, and you cannot take what you want without first offering payment. That payment may come in the form of money, credit, or something of equal value. Without currency, the shelves of the store remain out of reach, no matter how hungry or needy you may be. In the same way, the blessings of heaven, healing, peace, provision, abundance, guidance, are not bought with coins or paper bills. They are accessed through the one currency that holds value in the spiritual realm, and that currency is faith. Faith is not simply hope. Hope is a desire, a longing for something better, but faith is the assurance that what you desire already exists, already belongs to you, and is already on its way. Faith is the invisible hand that reaches into the eternal and brings the answer into the present. Without faith, prayer becomes mere words. With faith, prayer becomes a key that unlocks treasures unseen. And this is why it is said that without faith, it is impossible to please God. Because faith is not just belief in His existence. It is trust in His promises, confidence in His provision, and expectation of His power. The human mind is trained to measure everything by sight. We are taught to believe in what we see, touch, and hold. But the spiritual world operates differently. It demands that you believe first before you see. It requires that you step forward as though the ground is already firm, even when you cannot yet see it beneath your feet. Faith is the bridge between the unseen promise and the visible reality, and those who understand this principle are able to live in expectation rather than fear, in confidence rather than doubt. When you truly grasp faith as the currency of heaven, your prayers shift from pleading to declaring. You no longer say, "Lord, if it is possible, please let this happen." Instead, you say, "I know this is already mine, for you have spoken it, and I believe it." Faith does not beg, it receives. Faith does not question. It rests in certainty. Just as you would confidently hand over money at a store and walk out with your purchase, faith allows you to hand over belief and walk forward with assurance that what you prayed for is already secured. But here lies the challenge. Faith is often tested. Just as counterfeit money has no value, counterfeit faith, faith that is shallow, weak, or unstable, cannot unlock the fullness of blessing. Real faith remains steady when circumstances shake. Real faith speaks life when everything looks dead. Real faith holds on even when delay stretches longer than expected. It is in these moments of waiting and uncertainty that your faith proves its worth. It is not when everything is easy that faith matters, but when everything seems impossible. That is when faith, like true currency, demonstrates its power to secure what nothing else can buy. Faith as currency also teaches us that the size of our faith determines the measure of our blessing. A person who spends small will receive small. A person who spends abundantly will receive abundantly. If you only dare to believe for a little, then a little will come. But when you stretch your faith, when you dare to believe for the impossible, when you trust that the 11 million, the miracle, the healing, the breakthrough can indeed be yours, then heaven responds to that level of faith. It is not about greed. It is about trust. Trust that the source of provision is infinite, and therefore you are not limited in what you can receive. What makes faith so powerful is that it bypasses human logic. Logic will tell you it is impossible. Faith responds, all things are possible. Logic will insist there is no way. Faith whispers, a way has already been made. Logic will measure your ability, your resources, your background, and your failures. But faith measures only the size of the God you trust. That is why faith, and not talent, not connections, not wealth, is the true currency of heaven. So when you pray, when you dream, when you believe for more, remember that what moves heaven is not the eloquence of your words, but the strength of your faith. Every prayer is like presenting currency. Doubt is like handing over worthless paper. It carries no weight. But faith is the purest form of exchange. It speaks the language heaven responds to, and it has never once been rejected. Therefore, hold on to faith as tightly as you would hold on to the most valuable treasure. Guard it, strengthen it, feed it daily, for with it you can purchase peace in the middle of storms, joy in the midst of sorrow, healing in the face of sickness, and provision in the midst of lack. With faith, no blessing is out of reach. Without it, even the greatest opportunities will slip away. Faith is the only currency heaven honors, and with it, you are never bankrupt. You are infinitely wealthy. The shock of abundance is something few people ever prepare for, and yet it is the very thing that reveals the extraordinary generosity of the divine. Most of us live with the quiet expectation of getting just enough to make it through the day, enough to pay the bills, enough to heal a little, enough to carry on. We have been conditioned by life's struggles to shrink our dreams, to lower our prayers, to ask only for what seems reasonable. But when abundance comes, true abundance, it does not come in fragments or small drops. It comes like a flood. It overwhelms, it surprises, and yes, it frightens. Because abundance forces us to confront a reality we did not prepare for. That God does not think in terms of limits, and His blessings are not measured by the size of our comfort zones. Imagine praying for a small breakthrough, perhaps just enough to ease your burden, and instead you receive a blessing so large it changes the entire course of your life. Imagine expecting a small door to open, and instead the entire wall crumbles, leaving you standing in front of a horizon wider than you ever imagined. That is the nature of divine abundance. It rarely matches your expectation. It far exceeds it. And when it does, the first reaction is often not pure joy but shock. The human heart, accustomed to survival, trembles when confronted with overflow. It questions, why me? How can this be? Am I even capable of handling what has just come into my life? The shock of abundance reveals the smallness of human expectation, compared to the vastness of divine generosity. We think in terms of what we believe we deserve, but heaven gives in terms of what is possible. And possibility is not measured by our history, our failures, or our limitations. It is measured only by the limitless hand of God. When abundance crashes into your life, it shatters the old frameworks. Suddenly, you realize that the boundaries you lived within were not set by heaven, but by your own fears, doubts, and limited imagination. But with abundance comes a holy weight. Blessings are not toys, they carry responsibility. The shock of abundance is not just about receiving more. It is about being called higher. You may have asked for a little provision, but abundance will demand stewardship. You may have prayed for a little healing, but abundance will demand testimony. You may have expected a small opportunity, but abundance will demand vision. And this is why abundance often feels frightening, because it calls you into a greater version of yourself, a version you did not know you were capable of becoming. It is important to understand that abundance does not arrive when you are ready. It arrives to make you ready. No one feels completely prepared for sudden blessings. No one feels completely qualified to handle overflow. And yet, that is the miracle of it. Abundance grows you. It stretches your faith. It expands your vision. It forces you to let go of small thinking and step into the fullness of what you were created to carry. The shock is not meant to paralyze you. It is meant to awaken you. Think of the child who has only ever known scarcity, suddenly being handed a feast. At first they hesitate, their hands trembling, their mind whispering that it must be a mistake. But slowly, as they taste, as they see, as they experience, they realize this is not a trick. This is provision. So too is the experience of abundance for those who have lived with struggle, fear, or lack. At first, it feels too good to be true, but over time it becomes the new reality, and in that reality, gratitude replaces fear. Abundance is not just about material wealth. It is the overflowing presence of peace, joy, opportunities, and divine favor. When you are shocked by abundance, you are reminded that God's nature is not scarcity but generosity. You realize that the 11 million, or the miracle healing, or the breakthrough relationship, is not about numbers or status, but about showing you that the supply of heaven is limitless. And once you taste that abundance, you can never return to the poverty of small faith. So yes, abundance can be shocking. It can shake you, humble you, and even frighten you, but do not resist it. Do not question whether you are worthy of it. The shock of abundance is not a punishment. It is proof that heaven sees you, knows you, and has more for you than you could ever imagine. Let the shock wash over you, but do not let it stop you. Instead, let it remind you that the God you pray to does not deal in crumbs. He deals in overflow. And when you stand trembling at the gates of abundance, remember this truth. You are not only called to receive it, you are called to carry it, to steward it, and to let it pour through you so that others may also taste the goodness of divine generosity. One of the greatest mysteries of prayer and faith is learning to receive before you see. Human logic insists on evidence first. We are trained to trust only what can be touched, measured, or proven. If a person says they have money, we ask to see the account. If they claim to be healed, we look for medical confirmation. If they speak of victory, we want to see the proof. Yet in the spiritual realm, the order is reversed. You receive before you see. You take hold of the answer in your spirit long before it manifests in your reality. This is the very essence of faith, and it is what makes prayer powerful. Receiving before seeing is not about denial of reality, nor is it about pretending circumstances do not exist. It is about choosing to believe in a higher reality, one that is not confined by what your eyes currently observe. When you pray for provision, you may not immediately see the financial blessing, but in the spiritual realm, the answer is already released. When you pray for healing, your body may not yet show signs of recovery, but within the unseen, restoration is already in motion. To receive before seeing means you shift your posture from waiting to possessing. You begin to live, act, and speak as though what you asked for is already yours. This is why those who truly understand faith often appear strange to others. They speak words of victory while standing in the middle of struggle. They give thanks for abundance while their accounts still show lack. They celebrate healing while pain lingers in their body, and yet this is not delusion, it is alignment. It is the understanding that reality does not begin with sight, but with belief. Sight is only the final confirmation of what faith has already secured. Think of it like ordering something valuable online. You make the purchase, you receive a confirmation, and though the package has not yet arrived at your door, you live with the assurance that it is on its way. You do not question whether the order exists. You do not panic every hour wondering if it will show up. You trust the process. You act as though the product is already yours, even though it has not yet physically arrived. This is the spiritual principle of receiving before seeing. Prayer is your order, faith is your confirmation, and manifestation is the delivery. The reason many people never see their prayers fulfilled is because they refuse to receive until they see. They wait for visible proof before they believe, but that is not faith. That is sight, and sight cannot move the unseen. Faith alone has the power to reach into what cannot be seen and pull it into existence. This is why the ancient words declare that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It is the evidence even before the proof. Receiving before seeing also requires a shift in language. Instead of saying, "I will be blessed," you begin to declare, "I am blessed." Instead of saying, "One day I will be healed," you affirm, "I am healed." Instead of saying, "I hope provision comes," you declare, "Provision is mine." The language of faith is not future tense, it is present tense, because in the eyes of the divine, the moment you believe, the blessing is already delivered. It may not yet be visible to you, but in eternity it is already complete. This principle is both liberating and frightening. It is liberating because it releases you from the prison of waiting. You no longer live as someone hoping for a miracle. You live as someone already in possession of it. But it is frightening because it demands that you step out of logic, out of comfort, and into trust. To live as though you have what you cannot yet see feels risky, but it is this very risk that unlocks the supernatural. The act of receiving before seeing also prepares you for abundance. If you can only celebrate after the blessing arrives, you miss the training that faith provides. Faith teaches you to celebrate while waiting, to give thanks in advance, to dance in expectation before the music of manifestation begins to play. And when the answer finally arrives, you realize that it was not sudden. It was simply the visible catching up with what was already true in the invisible. So, when you pray, do not wait until the answer appears to receive it. Receive it now. Walk as though the door is already open. Speak as though the healing is already done. Live as though the abundance is already in your hands, because in truth, the moment you believe, it is already yours. Sight will catch up in time, but faith always arrives first. The greatest victories in life are not given to those who wait for proof, but to those who dare to rejoice before the evidence appears. To receive before seeing is to step into the rhythm of heaven itself, where blessings are secured not by sight, but by faith. God's correction is not rejection, but redirection, carries a truth that can completely transform the way we see hardships and failures in life. Too often, when we face trials, disappointments, or setbacks, we assume that it is a sign of God's displeasure or abandonment. The human heart is quick to interpret pain as punishment and silence as rejection. Yet, the reality is that God's correction is a mark of His love, not His rejection. He disciplines those He loves because He sees the greater purpose we cannot see in the moment. His correction is not meant to crush us, but to shape us, to guide us away from paths that would destroy us, and lead us instead toward the fullness of the life He has prepared. When a parent lovingly corrects a child, it is not because the parent wishes harm, but because they want their child to grow in wisdom and avoid mistakes that would bring regret. In the same way, God's correction often comes in the form of delays, closed doors, unanswered prayers, or the stirring in our spirit when we are about to make choices outside His will. At first, it may feel like rejection because our plans are stopped or our desires denied, but in truth, it is redirection. God knows the end from the beginning, and His vision is not limited as ours is. What we see as a loss is often His way of preserving us for something greater. Consider how many times in life we have prayed for things we thought were best for us, relationships, opportunities, or paths we desperately wanted to follow, only to later realize that if God had given them to us, they would have led us to harm or emptiness. In those moments of reflection, we come to understand that His no was not rejection but protection. His silence was not abandonment but preparation. Every detour He allows is carefully designed to position us closer to His perfect will, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. Correction also brings growth, for without it, we remain unchanged. Painful seasons refine us in ways comfort never can. Trials strip away pride, impatience, and reliance on self, teaching us humility and dependence on God. They strengthen our character, deepen our faith, and make us vessels that can carry greater blessings. If God allowed everything to go our way, we would never mature into the people He has called us to be. Just as gold must pass through fire to be purified, our souls must sometimes pass through seasons of correction to emerge stronger, wiser, and more aligned with His purpose. It is also important to remember that God's correction comes from His love, not His anger. Scripture reminds us that whom the Lord loves, He disciplines. His correction is a sign of belonging, proof that He is actively involved in our lives and committed to our growth. If He did not love us, He would allow us to wander aimlessly without guidance. But because He has chosen us, He patiently molds us, even if it means allowing discomfort for a season. His correction is never meant to destroy but to heal, to redirect us from what we thought was right to what He knows is best. When you understand this truth, your perspective on setbacks changes. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is God teaching me through this?" Instead of feeling abandoned, you start to trust that He is closer than ever, guiding your steps to something greater. The disappointment that once felt unbearable becomes a doorway to growth and new beginnings. The unanswered prayer becomes evidence that God has something better in store. Trial becomes a training ground for your destiny. In life, it is not rejection that defines us, but how we respond to correction. If we resist it, we remain stuck. But if we embrace it with faith, we are propelled forward into divine alignment. God's correction is like the gentle hand of a shepherd pulling back a sheep from danger. It may feel restrictive at first, but it ultimately saves the sheep's life. In the same way, His correction protects us from unseen dangers, from paths that lead to destruction, and brings us back onto the path of His perfect plan. So when life feels heavy, when doors close, when prayers seem unanswered, remember this: you are not rejected, you are being redirected. Every correction is an expression of God's deep love and intentional plan for your life. Trust His hand even when you do not understand His ways. What seems like a loss now may one day be revealed as the very thing that saved you. God's correction is never the end of your story. It is the turning point towards something greater, more fulfilling, and more aligned with His divine purpose. If you hold on to this truth, you will find peace even in the midst of uncertainty, because you know that His correction is not rejection, but the loving redirection of a Father who sees your tomorrow more clearly than you can see your today.